Good afternoon, everybody. We are live once again. HireMilitary. I'm Matt Quick, the Director of Training and Development. And today we have on our first military spouse. So I tried to reserve the Wednesday time slot for military spouses. So this is our first military spouse, Michele Helfgott-Waters. And we spoke a few months ago. And since then, she had some great news. So hopefully she can talk about that today. Talk about her journey, her life in the military as a spouse, and she's got some great stuff to talk about today. But she's on a time frame today, only got for 30 minutes because she's house hunting. So I don't want to take up that time, kind of how stressful it can be. So without further ado, Michele, welcome to the broadcast, and thank you for coming on here. And tell us how you become military spouse, challenges, how you've been doing, and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, thanks for having me. It's, really kismet that we spoke a few months ago. And as you said, a lot's changed, but a little about me. We did not start out as an active duty military family. When I met my husband, he was in the Air Force Reserve, actually Air National Guard. And I thought, 2 weeks a year, 1 weekend a month, easy peasy, no problem.
Not too bad.
Not too bad. There's good benefits, potential extra little retirement at the end. Done deal. So then he switched to the Air Force Reserve for career reasons and was doing that for a while. And then 9/11 happened. And when that occurred, our entire lives changed. He was put on presidential orders, Title 10 orders. So he went from being a reservist to now active duty. And we went from being a happy civilian family to an active duty military family, and we're thrown into the mix. I went from, having a second parent at home with me with our children and knowing that there was stability to now our world being turned upside down. At the time, I had a really successful career. And when the dust finally settled, we got our first orders and we PCS to Fort Polk, Louisiana.
The great Fort Polk, Louisiana.
The great Fort Polk, Louisiana.
Coming from Jersey to Louisiana. How do you like that?
We had amazing once-in-a-lifetime experiences. It was probably one of the best installations that we were ever at because it is in pretty much a pocket of nowhere. The installation when we were there did a great job of providing lots of activities through MWR for my kids.
Great down there.
It was a great location to be able to travel from all over in a part of the country that I never thought that I would live. So we had lots and lots of bucket list experiences, Paris, Texas,
You've been to
Mardi
Paris.
Gras, New Orleans, but I then found myself with no job, no career, no idea what I was going to do with my new life. And I was really lost.
So this is a typical, it could be a military spouse thing. When you're uprooted from where you lived, join the military, now you're all over the country.
Yep.
Before you get into all that, how is the mall down in Fort Polk area? It's like Walmart, right?
It is Walmart. It is. My kids still joke about that. Come on, y'all, we'll go to the wall.
So what kind of challenges did you have coming from, the Northeast to become a military spouse? What challenges did you have and how'd you overcome them?
Yeah, so honestly, one of the biggest challenges for me really was being from the Northeast, having grown up in between Philadelphia and New York. I had a pretty distinct New York accent.
It's still there a little bit.
It is still there a little bit. I haven't been back in a long time, but it is still there. And literally, people would refer to us as Yankees when they heard me speak. So first overcoming that, which is something I had never encountered, and I traveled a lot, but living in an environment where a lot of people live there for generations, and trying to break in as a newcomer is very, very hard. So I had that challenge. I also had the challenge of I no longer had a career. I had been a preschool director. I couldn't walk into a preschool director position in Louisiana, in Fort Polk, Louisiana, or the surrounding area. And I had to figure out what to do with myself. We got there. My husband started training for a deployment right away. And so he really wasn't there. We always joke that the kids and I did those 3+ years there, and he did maybe 18 months at the most.
That's the military.
And that's a stretch. But, I am one of those people who is very, very resourceful. And I kind of took a step back and said, okay, what can I do? Well, I became a great logistician because I was the only parent. I had kids and I had activities and I had dogs, and I needed to be able to keep everybody moving in the right direction.
True.
So I started looking at what skills was I gaining. That I have a lot of leadership skills. I quickly became involved in the FRG and ended up being the FRG leader.
And that takes a toll on you. So you have a family, husband's always training, and you took on the FRG responsibility, which is family readiness group, which they take care of really all of the military spouses. And you what's your role in that as a leader?
So your role in that as a leader is to really support and share resources. People think that it's a lot of different things, but really it is to be there for all your military spouses. Yeah. We have military spouses come in all shapes and sizes. We have military spouses who have perhaps married their childhood sweetheart and are leaving home for the first time, who are looking for somebody to support them and give them what they would get if they had stayed at home. We have, seasoned business professionals like myself who found themselves now as an active duty military spouse and had to learn a whole new way of living and talking and being, and rules to follow. I'm not a great rule follower. I break a lot of rules, always have.
It's not so.
So that was always a challenge for, the company command, because they would say something and I would say no, and you create a great rapport if you can back up what you're saying. But it's really about providing resources to let people be resourceful. And I was really fortunate during that time when I got to Fort Polk that Military Child Education Coalition, which is also known as MSEC, MCEC, was looking for trainers. And I was like, oh, all right, I can teach, I can train, I can do this. And so I got a part-time job with MSEC and started running workshops and spent a lot of time talking with military spouses. And what I kept hearing from military spouses is, we don't know where to turn, we don't know what resources to use, and we don't know how to find employment. Military spouse unemployment and underemployment is rampant.
And this is one of the reasons why each Wednesday I want to focus HireMilitary's attention on military spouses and bring people like you on to talk about it. So keep on going.
And it's hard because I knew what my value was. I knew that, I've been a successful business person. I've run successful retail programs and I had run a very successful preschool, but trying to navigate and figure out where to turn is very hard. And so I made a conscious decision after about 3 months in my role as a trainer with MSEC to change the course of my career moving forward. And I decided that I was going to focus on how could I help military spouses get access to resources, connect with the community, and most importantly, help spouses figure out how to gain employment, full-time or part-time, if that's what they wanted to do. Because when I started doing it, I didn't feel like there was anybody there to help me and support me. And the world for military spouses is now a very, very different place, even than it was just a couple years ago.
That's true.
We've got great organizations like yours, like HireMilitary, who are phenomenal about supporting military spouses. We have the MilSpo Academy, who I just came on board with, that is solely dedicated to training and supporting military spouses into employment. And there's tons of them out there. But my goal really has always been is showing people how to be resourceful and showing them how to use the resources that are available to them.
So
You know,
so you move to Fort Polk, you take on the FRG responsibility, you take on a part-time job, and you're still a full-time parent
yep,
and a dog owner, apparently.
yep,
So
multiple dogs.
you have all this responsibility. How do you find time to do all this stuff with just yourself?
Staying really organized. You know, my kids laugh because my organizational skills are very visual. So a wall in my office, which literally was the landing of our top stairs because we had a great big wall. And so when my husband was deployed, we had the map of the world so the kids could see where he was versus where we were.
Nice.
And we have family that lives all over the world so they could visualize it. But next to that were so many different colored sticky notes. I have them on my desk even now. There's like pink and blue and orange, and I got llamas somewhere. And that's how I stayed organized. And I knew, you know, as an FRG leader, you need to be able to know where people are located. We were in a unique situation that a lot of the soldiers were attached to other units. So I really needed to be able to keep track of that. But every kid had a color, every activity had a color. And it's still how I stay organized. You know, I've got sticky notes all over.
Hey, you have a little fan club going on right now. Amy Schick says hi.
I love Amy. We were at Fort Polk together.
There you go. Leticia Gutierrez says hi. We have Rebecca Medlin all saying hi to you. Ryan Jones, Lauren Oliver. So you got a big fan club now.
Yeah. And, you know, the military is a really, 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 really small world. You know, we laugh about it, but it legit is 3 degrees
1% of the population. It's very small.
It really is. When we PCS to JBLM in Washington, the neighbors who lived diagonally across the street from us, because we did not live on the installation, we lived off post. The people who lived diagonally across the street from us were very, very dear friends with one of my very, very dear friends from Fort Polk. Okay. So it just, and we didn't know the connection until we got there. And of course, you know, you PCS, your kids run across the street to meet the kids. It's the first thing everyone does.
Of course.
But it's those, but you know what? All those people and all those people that you just said we're jumping on, those are all resources. And for a military spouse, that's what it's about. Military spouses in general are not, I think, by most businesses, are not looked upon in the proper light. You know, we are probably the most resourceful people on the face of the earth because we have to be.
You have to be, yes.
PCS, if you have children, you PCS, and within 24 hours, you need to find somebody to sign your children over to who can sign if you can't get them from daycare. Or
some trusted people right there.
And so as military spouses, we have learned very quickly how to network, form relationships, and be resourceful. And what does that translate into in the real world? It translates into being a business development representative. It translates into being a customer success manager. It translates into being a virtual assistant. It translates in being a recruiter. So all of those skills that as a military spouse you have to gain and have are all translatable into the real world. And it's,
so you'd recommend, if an employer is watching this right now, you'd recommend hiring a military spouse, not just being a military spouse, but being resourceful. And what other reasons should an employer look for a military spouse? What other qualifications do they have?
I think that military spouses probably can handle more stress than anybody else in the world. You know, we laugh with this whole COVID-19 virus that started, you know, and I'm sure that you saw there was tons of memes and things about military spouses have been training for this their whole lives. And it's true. It's what we do. We know how to follow rules when you have to. We know how to navigate through ambiguous situations. Our entire lives are ambiguous.
You mentioned you're a rule breaker, though.
Huh?
You mentioned you're a rule breaker, though.
I am a rule breaker. But I know how to, I know how to follow them. I may not want to, but, you know.
Good point.
But it really, you know, it has, I think the silver lining with all of what has been going on the last couple of months is that it has shown employers across the board that remote work can be very successful. And for military spouses, that is a huge, huge, huge boon, because many of us, due to the fact that we don't always have a spouse around, we don't always have people to be there to help with our children and things like that, do really value having the opportunity to work remotely. Now, remote work does not mean having your kids play in the office with you while you're working.
But if they're there, it's fine these days, though.
But right now, my dogs constantly are interrupting almost every Zoom meeting I have. We have an 8-month-old Newfoundland Pyrenees puppy, so he's about this big.
Oh, what is
and he constantly, I locked the door to make sure that he wouldn't come in and be jumping up for, taking the camera.
It's fine, we're live.
Yeah, exactly. But what it has shown employers is that military spouses can work remotely, can be productive, because they're seeing it of their employees right now. And I would venture to say that there are lots of military spouses who are working in roles in businesses where their employers may not even know that they're military spouses.
That's true, because they don't put it out there all the time. I'm a military spouse, hire me, because they show their value, and it's found out later that they're a military spouse, which is really, it adds to their persona, I guess.
Right. But military spouses don't put it out there because there has been this perception from business is, why will I hire you? You're leaving in 2 years or 3 years. Or
the average person stays at a company probably about 3 years though, right?
Right. It really has changed with so many millennials in the workforce now. That stigma of leaving has definitely decreased because lots of people do it now. People don't stay at companies for 10, 15, 20 years anymore. There are very few companies that happens at. But military spouses all along, up until really a couple years ago, when championing military spouses really came to the forefront, we're kind of told, don't identify yourself as a military spouse. You don't want a potential employer to know that. Luckily, that narrative really has been changing.
Good.
One of the things that I have worked on when I was at JBLM, I was really fortunate to work with Hiring Our Heroes when they were launching the Military Spouse Economic Empowerment Zone. And one of the things we constantly were talking about is changing the narrative so it's not and military spouse or and spouse. Military spouses standing on their own 2 feet as their own people, not being the and.
I like that.
Because most of us aren't. We're there just like every other spouse. We support our spouse and we expect that same support back from our spouse. It just looks a little different in the military because if I get a great job offer and I want to take it, my spouse isn't going with me.
That's true. And it's funny you mention that because I'm not a big fan of the word dependent, and that's used in the military. Well, it's a common term.
Yeah.
But I find out throughout the years that I'm dependent on my spouse to do so much for me, so I can focus on military career. I'd even say honestly that her job as a military spouse, raising the kids, and building the household, was more difficult than me singly focusing on a military career. So for that, I'm dependent on them.
Yeah, and I think that, you have to have that balance. And a lot of times it's very hard for the active duty military member to be present to support their spouse. Because, as a spouse, I know that 9 out of 10 times I have to take the back seat when it comes to career decisions and things like that. And so being so fortunate that I've been able to build a career where I can support military spouses and I can train people and I can offer guidance and connect people to community resources has been a blessing. But I had to create that for myself. And
so you moved away from Jersey, you moved to Fort Polk, then to JBLM. Where are you at right now, and how'd you get there?
So right now, the kids and I are in Chicago. My husband actually left active duty and went into the reserves.
So you went through a
And
transition yourself because he went from active to reserve component. Was that tough for a military spouse to go through?
it's very different. It is, every time you PCS, you go through a transition.
That's true.
For most military spouses, it means leaving a job. It means looking for new jobs, finding new friends, all of those things that happen during transition. Transitioning out of active duty military was terrifying.
You lose your huge support network. It's just gone.
Right. And you do lose your support network. This is the first time in 14 years that we haven't lived on or next to a military installation.
That's terrifying. It can be terrifying at times.
It can be terrifying at times. And it's very, very different. We're fortunate that we're in a community that has really embraced us. That doesn't always happen. But my husband went into the reserves and then promptly got himself deployed. So,
congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, pretty typical. But the kids and I moved here to Chicago, and we're really enjoying it. When he comes home, he'll make a transition back out of active duty with the reserves at some point into the civilian world and continue his reserve component. But that's a whole other transition.
Yes.
I've been very fortunate that I've worked with a lot of transitioning service members, and the hardest thing, as you know, probably is it's losing that camaraderie. Well, for military spouses, it's that same thing. I'm very fortunate because I have deliberately been very, very active in a lot of military spouse groups, and
that's
the military spouse professional network, and the Hiring Our Heroes programs, and a myriad of different things. And I've stayed active in them because this is still my community. Once a military spouse, you're always a military spouse.
So even the FRG. So you didn't work when you first got to Fort Polk, but you joined the FRG as a leader. So that really kept your skills up to date, right?
It did, and I deliberately continued to look for volunteer activities when we were in Redstone Arsenal, when we were in JBLM. I continually looked for opportunities that allowed me to keep my skills current and active.
Because we hear about these gaps so much, and to overcome these gaps that military spouses do have from time to time is to get involved, like you said, get involved with the FRG, get involved with volunteerism, because that still counts as experience, right?
It absolutely does. And it's the same thing that we say to service members when they're trying to create a resume. It's focus on the skills that you have and how do they equate to the civilian world. Because, most people in the civilian world are not looking for somebody who's a tank mechanic. But
say it's not so.
That service member has tons of transferable skills. And it's the same thing for military spouses. A military spouse who is active in the community and volunteers and runs programs and maybe is the treasurer in a group, all of those skills are directly transferable into the civilian world. So it's all about how are you keeping your skills current and how are you finding out what you want to do. And I will, for everybody watching, one of my favorite sites to use is onetonline.org. If you're not familiar with it, check it out, because you can put in any job title you want and you can follow it down a million different rabbit holes. And every time you find something that you like, put it into a Word document and you'll start seeing a pattern. But it's a great way to kind of figure a little bit out about what you want to do, and it's a great resource.
Michele, we have 5 more minutes because you have to go house hunting. So
I do.
So all this stuff you talked about built you up for a new career as what, and how do you impact specifically and solely military spouses now?
So I just came on board with the Millspo Academy as their,
congratulations.
thank you, brand new, super excited, as their director of internships and career advisement, career
How did
placement.
they find you, or how the whole process worked that you landed this opportunity?
It came about, one of my colleagues was on a military spouse job board and said, "Oh, hey, we're looking for a trainer." That's how this all started. And I was like,
Okay.
"Oh, I'm a trainer. I train military spouses. This is remote. That's cool." All right, we started a conversation. It morphed into, after a number of conversations with various people within the organization, me being brought on board, but in a different role, because we know that the training we offer is fantastic, but the end result is getting military spouses employed. And so yesterday we announced the launch of our new internship program, and we are partnering with Instant Teams, which is a huge military spouse employer and proponent. And we will be starting our first internship cohort next week. So it's super exciting. And I just really determined a course for myself, Matt. You know, I decided that I was going to make sure that as I was gaining steps in my career and moving the voice of military spouses forward, I was going to bring people along with me.
And that makes sense. So everything you did up to this point led you to a career that now you can just solely impact military spouses, the same military spouse that needed the resources back in the Fort Polk days, right?
Yep, absolutely. And, you know, we're very fortunate that the world of business is starting to view military spouses differently. And I like to think that my big mouth has had something to do with that. You know, I was at an event at JBLM, and I'm really passionate when I talk about what I do and the amazing body of talent that military spouses encompass. And afterwards, I was at a roundtable, and afterwards someone's like, "Are you running for office? You're so passionate."
Not
and they
yet.
meant it kind of like as a dig, but I was like, thank you very much. I am. And I think the more people who have a voice, and, you know, the more military spouses like me can partner and come and talk on platforms like HireMilitary offers, the more we can move the dial forward in the right direction to have military spouses gain employment. And if they don't want to gain employment, then gain whatever they need in their lives to be able to connect with their communities and volunteer and have resources to offer to themselves and to other military spouses.
Yeah, there's plenty of military spouses now that on LinkedIn that are doing a tremendous work. Emerald Trejo, she's phenomenal. She's out there in California doing great things, and people like that encourage others to do so much more. So, Michele, thank you for your time today. And you get the last word because you have about a minute left. What's your last word advice to the military spouses?
So my two things. One, if you are not connected with me on LinkedIn, then please connect with me on LinkedIn.
So on this post, she is now linked. So go click on her name, go her profile, send her a note, please.
Yes. And start searching out organizations like HireMilitary, start searching out organizations like Millspo Academy. Start looking for people that you can connect with and reach out to, because you have to be resourceful. You know, one of the things that I always talk about is resourcefulness for the resourceful spouse. And
say that again. That's pretty good. Say that again.
Resourcefulness for the resourceful spouse. Military spouses are super resourceful. You have to figure out how to use that to connect with the people who are going to help you. And don't be afraid to reach out. If I had not seen Matt's post a couple months ago where he put his phone number on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, I'm driving in my car. Call me if you want to talk."
I'm not going to say that was a mistake because it's out there now, but I get a lot of phone calls now.
But he was willing to put himself out there to help any veteran or any military spouse to move forward. And he provided me with some amazing insight that let me kind of take a step back and take a look at where I wanted to go forward. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Everybody who is out there who says they want to assist you, ask the questions. Because if you don't ask those questions, you can't connect with resources and you can't move forward.
That is so true. Just, hey, take the phone call sometimes and
Yep.
don't ghost anybody.
Exactly.
Hey, with that said, Michelle, I appreciate it. Today's been a great conversation. It's been a half hour. We're 1 minute over. I don't want to make you late for your house hunting tour today. So with that being said, we'll be back on tomorrow at 2 p.m. East Coast time, every weekday from now on until I get tired or you get tired of me. Either way, I'm on here. Michelle, thank you very much. And I know we'll talk soon, maybe tomorrow.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Bye, everyone.
All right. Take care, everybody.